So welcome to the first of our Winning Edge Investments webinars. We've got some of our pro punters and analysts who've been good enough to give us a bit of a look under the bonnet and show us how they actually go about coming up with their ratings and their bets. So first joining us today is our New South Wales racing analyst, Mark Rhoden. How you going, Mark?
Very well, thanks, Mark. How are you?
Good. Yeah, as I said, we're just going to get you guys to give everyone a bit of a look. Obviously, you've got a few secrets that we're not going to give away, but give everyone a bit of a look at how you might rate a race and come up with rated prices in a bet. So, that's probably enough from me. So I'll hand over to you if you just wanted to take us through how you kick off your process and just explain to us what we're looking at.
Yeah, sure thing, Mark. Well, as you can see on the screen here, this is a race from a couple of weeks ago at Rose Hill. It was on Rose Hill Guineas Day, the Derby Munro Stakes, Golden Slipper Day actually.
Yep.
But it was race one, and I just thought it'd be worthwhile if I just showed people, gave them an overview of the sort of spreadsheets and so forth that I use, that derived from my database, and these are the sort of tools I use when doing the form. Rating races, coming up with markets, and eventually identifying the horses I want to back.
Sure.
So this top sheet, this is sort of the master sheet. It's just an overview of the runners in the race with very basic race information, distance, class, prize money, that kind of thing.
And this is downloaded from your. This form is downloaded from your database.
Yeah. There's a third party, provider. It's then converted into this format. There's only me and a friend of mine who's been using this software for quite some time that uses, this exact format in Australia, as far as I know. So, I mean, if anyone's used, the commercially available databases before, there'll be a lot of this will be in some ways familiar, but this is just our, personalised take on it.
Sure.
So yeah, as you can see there, the information's pretty self-explanatory. Runners and riders, weight, got trainer, sire, and that kind of thing. It becomes where my input comes into it is over towards the right-hand side of the screen here, the rating column.
Yep.
We'll see as we go into more depth how that's sort of derived, but that's the rating figure I've given each horse in the race, and as you can see in the column next to it, that is then by the program converted just straight into a price. Now, we don't think there's anything else on this page that really needs much more explanation, so we might just skip through using this next runner tab.
Yep.
So using that, I can just run through back and forth through all the runners in the field.
Okay.
Now, this is a more in-depth look at each horse. As you can see there, a lot of the information is as you'd expect to find in most form guides: date, track condition, finishing position, all that sort of stuff. Weight carried, distance. We've got a rail position in there, which is quite handy. That map is a basic. That map column is just a basic position in running at two various points of the race. It's not, cast iron correct, but it's a good overview. So for a horse like this, Harassed, who ended up going forward this day, you can see actually back last prep here and here. The fact of him being on the pace wouldn't be a complete shock to you. So just as the way I do my speed maps is a bit more detailed than that, but as a quick overview, that's useful.
Yep.
You've got track speed, which is just on against our time standards, how fast or slow the track was playing. So 1.0 is bang on standard or close enough to it. Numbers less than 1, 0.98 would suggest it's faster than standard. And here's a wet track run back here, which is 1.05, and that was a heavy 9. Not surprising. 1.05 means 50% slower than, 5% slower than standard, so significantly rain affected.
And that's derived from times?
That's derived from our own time standards in our database. So and so it quite often lines up with the official track rating, but not always, and it's just another little guide we use.
Yep.
Over here, type is just the class of the race. Should be pretty self-explanatory. So that was a 3-year-old listed race, set weights and penalties, Group 1, 3-year-old set weights. That should be pretty self-explanatory, hopefully.
Yep.
Race winners in there. Pace, a bit similar to track speed. This is but for the individual race, just derived from how much faster they went to the 400 metres of each race compared to post the 400 metres.
Yep.
So in a number less than 1 is a fast pace. So that was that race that Parask ran in last time that I'm excited one was 9:77. That's quite quick. And you can see back here in October when he won the Guineas Prelude down at Caulfield, he raced on the speed and the pace of that was 1.03, which is a slow pace. So he was that day up on the speed and a slow pace, and obviously got his chance to do his best that day.
Okay, all right.
Yep. Just moving across here, we've got, this is just an outsourced video comment. Gives you, they're useful enough. They give you an idea of where they settled and whether they covered ground and, rough guide to finishing speed. And any racing incidents such as, blocks or checks or that kind of thing.
So that's not your own comment?
That's not my own comment.
Form guide? Or?
No, I do my own videos, but I don't keep them in this particular database. And to be honest, whenever I'm doing the form on a race, I will always go back to the tape and watch at least the last 400 of their last run or two anyway, just to refresh my memory. Mm-hmm. And in particular, if there's something that stands out from that text video comment, I'll definitely run the rule over it and make up my own opinion on what that incident cost the horse or, something like that.
Yep.
Now, to the absolute mechanics of how I do the form and price, this column here is the past performance rating. So every horse's run is given a rating. That's derived from our time standards, the pace of the particular race, and weight carried. A lot of people these days tend towards the view that weight is either of not much value or at least certainly well enough priced in by the market to, make it not that big a factor.
Yeah.
I certainly agree that in days gone by it was overrated. I'm starting to come around to the view that perhaps because that other view has become so common that there might be a little edge in using it again. But in any case, the way we use rate isn't, the traditional 3 pounds per length, one size fits all sort of method that was, from the Don Scott era.
Yep.
A lot of people who, with a weight ratings background, would have learnt. It's a bit more complex than that. The distance of the race is taken into account, the pace of the race. So weight is used to as one of the building blocks of the rating. But when it comes to actually doing the form, just as an aside, one of my great touchstones in doing the form is that weight doesn't affect all horses in the same way, and that a horse who is one paced, for instance, will not benefit from a significant weight drop in the way that a horse that can accelerate will.
Right.
So that's where, if I see a horse that I think is one paced and he's got a high or a peak rating carrying 60 kilos or something, and he's dropping down to 54, I'll actually penalise him for the weight drop, because I don't think he's going to be able to rate to that level with the lesser weight, because he's the sort of horse that won't run any faster with a weight drop.
Okay.
On the other hand, a sort of young improving horse that can run great sectionals and has a great turn of foot, if it's dropping from 58 to 53, I'll be more inclined to be as kind to it as I can, because I think the weight drop will really suit it.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's certainly not with weight a one size fits all approach, and I do think that's a trap. That's one thing I would have in common with a lot of the weight knockers these days. Sure. Anyway, that's that's just one aspect of how this rating's derived. Time and how fast they run is the absolute key.
Yep.
Especially over short courses, the fastest horse, given all other things being equal, is the one you want to be on.
Yep.
And so all of that information we try and put into a rating figure. It's on its own scale, but you looking at these figures, you can sort of equate them to, say, time form figures. They're not on exactly the same scale. They're actually a bit lower than time form figures I've found.
Yep.
But it's the same kind of thing. And in, very crude terms, it's about 1 point is half a length.
Okay.
Again, that's not true in all cases, but just to give you a guide, that's the sort of scale it works on.
And I guess just in terms of, if we can maybe sort of summarise the form factors that are in that rating. Obviously, it's weight,
it's
time,
weight, time, and just as important as the overall time is the pace of the race. So if due to a slow, or in certain cases, exceptionally fast pace, the overall time can be impacted negatively by that. I'll take that into account, and I have guidelines for how I do that, but it also, I found if I've ever tried to make it too strict or even automate it, I'll get wrong answers.
Okay.
And, when you're using times to rate horses on turf tracks, there are so many variables that come into play that just 100% blindly following the figures all day during a race meeting can get you into trouble. And not even with obvious things like track downgrades. I mean, everyone would realise that would affect the times, but there's wind shifts and even just wear and tear during the day, or tracks can improve during the day. When you get to know the pool of horses like I do, you can just see what the times are strictly telling you might be slightly off, that you can pick that up and hopefully correct it. But so it's, I'd say the way the ratings are arrived at, certainly mostly science, but there is a little bit of art, my own subjective opinion in creating them as well.
So you don't take that rating and then, I guess from that, add your subjective opinion, and that's actually cooked into that number as well?
Are you talking in terms of rating post-race, after the race?
Yeah.
Well, if the times, for instance, if the time's telling me that every horse in the race has gone to a new peak, even the ones running 5th, 6th, 7th.
Yep.
Either it's an incredible race and it's, you must back every horse out of it, or there's something gone slightly wrong with our calculations, and I'll need to, sort of re-slice the meeting and see if there's something I've missed, but like a wind shift or, an improvement in the track or something like that.
Right, and then you'll modify that number based on that.
Yeah, that's right. And after a race meeting, when I'm assigning the ratings, if something's not right, you can tell pretty quickly, because most horses, you have a fair idea that if they perform well, if they win, for instance, of what sort of rating they're capable of.
Yep.
So, bearing that in mind, it's pretty easy to see when something's not quite right.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, so, that's sort of touching on what I do after a race. But in this case, before a race, assuming I'm happy with all those, once they're in the database, I'm happy with all those figures. So then I use that as the basis of my pre-race analysis. So,
yep.
As you can see here, Perast, as we mentioned before, he won the Caulfield Guineas Prelude back last October, and he actually rated 111. I should touch on first, because of the different weights they're going to carry today in the future race, we have to allow for that to some degree when pricing. So that's where you'll set this job figure up here.
Yep.
That's just derived from a sort of strength figure we give the race, and then it's just adjusted for the different weights the horses are carrying. And it's again, it's certainly not as harsh as weight rating students might have been in days gone by, but there is a little penalty for those up in the weights, obviously. So,
okay.
these rating figures here, they're not all like with like, comparing like with like because of the different weights they're carrying today. But,
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
anyway, so basically, calling it the job, we're saying that's the sort of figure it needs to do to be competitive in this race.
Yep.
We would need to do at the very least that to be a winning chance in this race. So, so Perest, as you can see, at his best, got up to 111 last prep. He was fifth up though, and he did, as we mentioned before, he got on the speed in a slowly run race, and everything panned out perfectly for him.
Yeah.
And that, as you can see from that column, is thus far his career peak. Whether he'd be able to do that today over 1200 in a fast tempo would be questionable. And as you can see, the figure that big bold blue figure is the one I'm actually using to price. I've taken him back about 2 lengths from that 107, which he was actually to this point his best rating over today's distance of 1200.
Yeah. Okay.
In a nutshell, that's what I'm trying to do when I assign this figure. It's try and work out what are they capable of what rating are they capable of returning under the conditions of today's race, and that's going to be distance and pace of the race, and track condition, and speed map, and all of the other sort of traditional form factors that most people would look at if they were form students.
Yeah, where they're at in their prep and that.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, where they are in the prep. Parasta's second up today. His pattern last preparation suggested it took him 3, 4, 5 runs to peak. So, you'd have to be very aggressive to give him his best second up at 1200. Put it that way.
Sure.
I just very quickly have got a speed map here. It's pretty crude for the race. What we do is basically, I just start by giving them a rough position and running figure, as you can see there.
Yep.
And that's not set in stone either. Then it's just a bit of knowledge of the jockeys, what they might do considering where they're drawn, that sort of thing. I basically just start from my likely leader and work back from there. But that all comes into play when you're assigning a ratings figure to price from as well.
So you obviously just concentrate on New South Wales, and it's things like that where that, I guess, intimate knowledge of the limited area is more useful.
Definitely when mapping. For instance, if you put a race in Adelaide or Perth in front of me, I might be able to have a go off the numbers at doing a map, but someone who knew the horses and the jockeys and the trainers' likes and dislikes would do a far better job than I could. And hopefully I know them well enough to overcome that in New South Wales at least.
Yep.
The other figure here next to the performance rating figure is the M rate column. Now that's a market perception figure that we've tried to line up as close as we can with our performance rating scale. So I find this quite useful. So what that's basically, that's not a reflection of how the horse performed on that day. It's a reflection of how the market thought it was going to perform.
Yep.
So, and that's derived from the strength of the race, in my opinion, and the relative SPs of the horses in the race. So,
yep.
As you can see, this day he peaked Perast. He rated 111, but the market only thought he was going to rate 104, and that sort of reflected in his SP of $11.
Yeah.
The market didn't expect him to win it and win well. It probably thought he was going to run about 3 lengths off that and run, third or fourth. It was probably fourth or fifth pick in the market, something like that. So it's saying that by winning that race by a length, he outperformed his market perception by 7 points. And
okay.
A lot of people, try and use SP as a, past SPs as a guide in their form analysis. And I think it's a useful tool. It's certainly not the be-all and end-all, but it's a useful tool. And I find that figure there a very helpful way of quantifying it. So it's probably even more useful with younger horses who've only had a handful of starts. If it's a couple of times been short in the market and failed, I'll have a much better guide on what the actual rating figure on our scale that the market was expecting. So it might have only rated 90, but the market thinks, it's probably got the ability to do 100 if it, gets its act together. So that's something I can bear in mind when I'm pricing a race like that.
Yeah. Okay.
As horses get older, it's probably less important. I'm more inclined to just assess them off what they've shown. But it's an interesting little guide anyway, and it's just another piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
So that's brass, and I sort of gave you a bit of an outline of how I came up with 107, and that still was going to make him competitive in the race. We go back, compared to his job of 106.2. So, as you can see, as this is obviously a historical race, that rating of 107 that I gave him a rated price of close to $10. So he clearly wasn't the top pick. The favourite was I'm Excited, who ended up winning. She only needed to do 104.4 to be competitive. And as you can see, her last two starts, she'd rated 109 and 108. So she was clearly right in this race. She'd won both races, so
Yep.
It's obvious in a sense. But that's how well in she appeared to be in this race. She had to be the favourite in this race. So I actually was a little conservative. I didn't give her absolute best to price her. I gave her 108. One off, and even taking that point off, that still made her $3.50 favourite and well clear of the second pick, Isaurian, who was $7.40.
Yep.
Just having Isaurian was an interesting runner himself. I remember when I was doing the form in this race, he was unbeaten. He'd won a maiden in October, been put away, and come back at Warwick Farm again in a midweek meeting over 1,000, in which it was a weak field, but it was very impressive. He made up a lot of ground in the last 100 metres and got up to win. Rated 106, which certainly put him in the race, as you see, carrying the same weight as I'm Excited, same job figure, 104.4, so that was going to be enough. I was happy to price him off that, but I was, a horse like that who's produced such a big figure first up, that's always a little bit of concern whether they can reproduce it. He did on this occasion. He actually went a point better than that, 107, and ran I'm Excited to about half a length.
Sure.
Let me see here. Here's a Cume. Here's a good example of a horse who had a pretty good improving pattern through a first couple of preps, getting up to 103 here at a midweeker at Warwick Farm, then couldn't reproduce that and went back to 98, and then came back this prep at 103, which is a good sign. She's come back at her previous level, gone about the same second up, and then sort of spiked a little bit up to 107, running second to I'm Excited last time out. Now, the decision I make here, if I say, well, 107's her new level and she can maintain that, 107's going to have her 4 points clear of this job figure, which is actually going to have her level with or in front of the much more consistent I'm Excited.
Yep.
Go back to her. So she'd done around at 107.89 marks before her spell, and then in both runs this prep. So I was very happy to mark her around that level. She'd proven it a couple of times now that's where she sits.
Yep.
A Cume, on the other hand, built a base to get to there, come backwards. Now, she has improved this prep. She's got a sort of new little base here and then stepped up here. In fact, you see the M rate figure is 10 points off. She was 16 to 1 that day, and she's run really well. Run second, 3/4 of a length to I'm Excited.
Yep.
The question I ask myself is that sustainable? And I've decided no. And brought her back to 104. Could have actually been more aggressive. And from memory, I think the market agreed. There was certainly a big gap in the market between I'm Excited and a Cume. So that sort of demonstrates it's not simply a question of plugging in their sort of best figure into the spreadsheet and seeing what prices are spat out and going from there. You've really got to be a bit more nuanced than that,
Yep.
and ask yourself what, are they going to do their best today? What is the most likely rating they can return under today's conditions? A lot of people try and automate that, using various other factors. Like it can even just be a weighted average of their ratings or something like that, or average of ratings at the distance and so on. I prefer to do it not in so strictly a mechanical sense, but just to use my sort of knowledge of the horses to come up with a figure that I think's the right one.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where my judgment comes into it, and has its effect. If Zazie Bar was the same, she had already been to her peak and come off, so she actually peaked also behind I'm Excited. Her first up win, not her second up win, improved 5 points off her previous best to 106.
Yeah.
And then come back to 102. So that was also suggesting to me that the 106 wasn't sustainable. Also up to 1,200 metres was another thing. So I sort of disregarded the 106. Said there's no way known she's going to go that well, and priced her up 101.
Okay.
Yeah. Well.
So that's a process you'll basically do for every horse in the race?
Yep, it is. And after I've done that, all those figures get fed back to the sort of master front page sheet, and that's where they appear, and that's a pricing module which converts the relative ratings into a market.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm this figure here, without boring into too many details, is sort of a confidence figure. 1.45 sort of a default position, but if, for instance, I was very confident of my figures on this race and I wanted to get the favourite shorter and the outsiders longer, I could up it to 1.5, and as you can see there, that would bring in I'm Excited into 330.
Oh, yeah.
And the roughies would blow out to bigger than they were. Conversely, if I wasn't confident and I thought the race was a bit iffy and I want to bring it down to, say, 1.4, then I'm Excited goes out to 380. The middle ones sort of stay where they are, and the roughies are brought in a bit. So that's just another little method of tinkering around with the market, depending on your confidence level.
Yep.
But as it was for this race, I left it where it was, and we came out with I'm Excited at 350, well clear of Azorian at 740, and then a gap to the others.
Yep.
Now, as I think I might have touched on our last Q&A, this is the sort of horse that I sort of make the cornerstone of my betting and the selections I provide for the service too. Because all my research has shown that when I've got horses 6% or more clear of the second pick, they have a great strike rate and they're profitable long term. So we've got to be on them. So that's what this clear figure is. So once that's 0.15, so it's 15% clear of a Saurian. So it's just if it's anything like the 350 mark, I'm going to be on it.
Yep.
So anything over that comes out 0.06 or above is one I'm seriously looking at as a bet for myself and for the service. Because of the way I do the form, and I sort of touched on this when we had a look at I'm Excited, knowing that those sort of selections have such a good record and I'm very likely to be on them, I do interrogate them a little bit more closely than most runners. So the purpose of that being, I really want to be sure, I want to have a good bet on them and recommend a bet on them to the members as well. So
yeah,
I'm Excited. I could have priced off 109, which, just to give you an example of how big a difference that would have made, if I plug in 109 here instead of 108, moves from 350 to 270. So that's a quite significant difference.
Yeah.
But also it's so 270 wasn't a ridiculous price, because 109 was, you could justify giving the horse 109 today.
Yeah.
But I haven't. I've been a bit more conservative. And so when I've been that when I have been conservative and I've still got it 15% clear of the second horse, then it's just, it's a bet for sure.
Sure.
So, but what that also means is if I'm being a little bit harder on these top selections, then some of these ones in the middle, like Cume, Terabyte, Parast, I've sort of, may have been a little bit kinder to, can be a bit overpriced, which is why I tend not to recommend a lot of overlays in that range. Just bearing in mind that I might, in terms of a true 100% market, I might have been a little bit too kind to them. So assigning these ratings, it's not strictly a question of finding the, what the exact probability, 100% market of each of the runners is, because, that's difficult, bordering on impossible to ascertain. It's more about interrogating the shape of the market and the number of main chances there are, and then really testing whether those up the top of the market are good bets or not, or if they are a bit risky. So in this case, it was clearly well clear enough that it had to be back.
Yeah.
I do, as members will have noticed, recommend longer price runners and middle pinners from time to time. The stakes always considerably lower than on the top selections, but those ones I recommend in those cases will have been subjected to a similar sort of process. I know they're a good value price, and I've sort of tested the rating I've given them, that I'm very confident that I couldn't really get this horse much longer than the price I've got it, and it's still backable odds, and it's still a real winning chance. So that sort of explains that, hopefully. While we're here, I might just I've got my results and post-race rating sheet here, and we can actually see how they lined up after the race.
Yep.
In particular regard to the first two. Just take a couple of seconds. As I said, I'm excited to beat the Saurian. Here it is. Hopefully this comes up now. Yes, here it is. I won't go into too much detail on this sheet. Just suffice to say, this is the sheet I'd use to assign the ratings after a meeting.
Yep.
There's this race, but there are all the big races on the day, the Slipper, the Guineas, the Winch and the George Rider. And if you remember, I rated I'm excited to price off 108. Go to her here. The final rating is what you end up on, 107.9. So we got that one pretty close. Saurian, now as I said, I'm excited well clear. She came up the fence, which probably wasn't best ground. Saurian hit the line really well, and he's actually improved a point from 106 to 107 from his first up run, and that's resulted in giving I'm excited a really good race.
Yeah.
And well, he's going around on Saturday at Randwick, so we'll see how those figures hold up going forward. And what ended up running third, Zazi Bar, that was the horse that had peaked at 106. Her previous best were 101, 102. I priced her for 101. She's ended up doing 101. And well, you can see by that margin.
Sure.
And so we go. There's Manicure. Interestingly, she'd done 99, 100 before a spell, come back doing 100. She, I can tell you, improved sharply last Saturday, running very close. I think it was third behind Hootson in the PJ Bell. So she come back better this prep, I would say.
Yeah.
And while I am on this sheet, just to give you an idea of perhaps the scale and the difference between different classes. We had the George Rider on this day, where it was Winks, Happy Quapper, Kementari. So you can see these decent 3-year-olds around the 107, 108 range. If we scroll through to race 5. Winks, as you can see this day, rated 120, and that is actually well below her best, which was in her second Cox Plate win, of course, when she destroyed Hartnell.
Yeah.
131, that's the highest figure we've got in the database, not surprisingly. So
Yep.
that just shows you at that end of the scale the differences. But even the way she's going this prep at 120, if she keeps rating over 120, she's especially with the weight advantage for mares and weight for age races, nothing can beat her. So as long as she keeps performing to that level, that's why her winning streak keeps going.
Yeah, sure.
He's happy clever. This gives me nightmares. I made a mistake in the Doncaster, to be honest. He'd rated 120 here in a very gallant second to Winks in the George Rider.
Yeah.
And I, for some reason, decided the one alley wasn't going to be much good on Saturday. I thought they might water the track. They didn't. And I thought he might be midfield fence. And so I'm furious. I only marked him off 118, which had him about $6, which wasn't a ridiculous price compared to the market. But if I'd given him 119, if I'd given him the 120, I would have had him favourite and a clear bet, and he certainly won like that.
Yeah.
I'm a bit annoyed I didn't do that. So that's, but that's the trick of being an analyst. You're going to have to make, dozens of these decisions every time you do the form on a meeting. So you're not going to get all of them right. The trick is to get as many right as you can.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that hopefully gives you enough of an overview of the way I do it.
Yeah, I think it gives everyone just a bit of an idea of, I guess, almost day to day what you're doing in terms of coming up with in terms of how you do the form, and then come up with your ratings, such.
Well, that's true. This is what I spend. This is what takes up most of my days, is either doing the form or doing post race ratings or studying tapes. So it's you just do this often enough, and hopefully it becomes
and this is something you've, I guess, finessed over you've been doing this on either side of the fence for quite some time. So this is a process you've finessed in that time, is it?
It certainly is. In the corporate world, I was always using ratings databases that weren't exactly the same as this, but were certainly similar.
Yep.
And that approach to doing the form that I just outlined today is certainly one I'm very used to and very comfortable with. So
sure.
Hopefully that leads to good results.
Very good. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for that today, Mark. As I said, it's quite rare for anyone to get a good look at how a serious or professional punter does the form if they're not used to doing it themselves. So definitely a very interesting look at things. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, we'll put all the contact details down in the comments there. And yeah, if we've got any questions, just fire them through.
Yes, absolutely. Got to reiterate that point. I hope this was useful and made sense. But if there's anything that does need clarification, please get in touch, and I'm happy to answer any or all questions.
No problems. Well, thanks for your time today, Mark. Good luck today, and also on Saturday for the second day of the championships.
Yep, thanks very much, Mark. No problem. Thanks for your help today.